Avengers Age of Ultron is garbage, folks.
Is it an alligator or a crocodile? I don't know the difference, and at this point I'm too afraid to ask.
Look at that. That is a werewolf, folks.
If you help me, what's it gonna be? Ant-Man.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Den of Geek Presents Marvel Standom, where each week we bring you the latest and greatest that the MCU has to offer and much more. And you know what? This week might be one of those much more kind of weeks because we're going to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to need you to bear with me because I don't know if there's going to be technical difficulties. I don't know. We're going to see how this works. But in case you forgot, I'm Mike Cecchini. I am your host. And with me for all time and always, say hello to Den of Geek TV editor Alec Bojalad. And welcome back, pop culture writer, Marvel expert, DOG contributor, Joe George. Folks, Kirsten Howard is on a much-deserved vacation this week, but they will be back next week. And as you'll see shortly, they're here in spirit. So, like I said, it's going to be something of a different show. We are going to talk about Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. The three of us have seen it. We are not talking spoilers this week. You will want to tune in next week for a full spoiler-filled breakdown of a movie that is like surprisingly full of kind of spoilery stuff, right? Which is not what I expected from the third entry in the Ant-Man franchise. I also never really expected there to be a third entry in the Ant-Man franchise. So, you know, what do I know? But we've also got some very cool interviews with the cast and producers of the delightful Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur animated series and Marvel's Wastelanders, the cool scripted podcast that just released its final installment, which is a massive team up for this post-apocalyptic adventure in a weird, kind of familiar version of the Marvel Universe. So yeah, so it's a stacked show, but like I said, we're trying some different things. We'll see how it goes. So first up, I think we should just dive right into Quantumania. What do you fellas think?
Sounds good.
Does that mean that we dive into it now?
Yeah.
By dive, we're going to pause for a second and then dive.
Joe, what do you think? We're gonna start this one off with you because I feel like we're kind of on the same page with this movie personally, but I'd like to get your thoughts on this.
I really enjoyed it. I'm surprised at how much I enjoyed it because last week we were talking about in our preview that we were concerned that they were going to hang way too much on an Ant-Man movie, right? That the appeal of the Ant-Man movies is they're light and they're breezy and they're funny. We were worried that this would just be the bear it down. And I'm shocked to say that I did not find it overbearing at all. I still found it to be light and breezy, even though it's taking place in a totally different location. It felt of a piece with previous Ant-Man movies. It didn't feel overstuffed. And it somehow set up the big stakes that it needed to do without burying Ant-Man. So I don't know that it's going to ever be my favorite Marvel movie. I think it's a solid 3-star movie because there are problems, but overall, I had a really good time. I'm looking forward to watching it again.
Alec, how about you?
I kind of loved it. I think I really, really, really enjoyed it, which is, I guess, a little surprising because I struggled with a lot of Phase 4 a lot. I thought that was, Marvel really wasn't at its best in Phase 4. It didn't feel like. I feel like it struggled to find purpose. The offerings were kind of all over the place. Stuff that I thought would be slam dunks, like Thor: Love and Thunder, ended up being some of my least favorite Marvel content ever released. But yeah, there's something about Quantumania that just kind of feels old school Marvel. It's a nice, complete, fulfilling story that's presents most of kind of the same stuff you've already seen, but in a nice, complete package, a little bit of creativity there. And it also feels like it's part of a larger universe, more so than any of like the Phase 4 offerings. I'm glad that we're talking about it in a spoiler-free capacity at the moment, because I feel like I have like a lot to say, weirdly, when it comes time to spoiler-filled. But for now, I'll just say, like, maybe it's lame to talk about the meta environment around a movie itself, like the reviews and stuff. But I'm just like a little surprised that this one has gotten such a divisive response from early critics. This to me just seems like a good Marvel movie, and it makes me wonder. I'm prattling on now, I'll stop, but it makes me wonder if like if critics came to that same Phase 4 conclusion that like I did and maybe we did, just one movie too late. Like, I'm wondering if the Ant-Man reviews are kind of more indicative of how people feel about Marvel at large right now than the film itself. Because I definitely don't blame anybody for experiencing like severe Marvel fatigue. I just thought that this was the one that kind of snapped me out of it a bit. We shall see when this is out and everybody else sees it.
Yeah, I do feel like this movie is like the first one to really be bearing the brunt of some genuine and, you know, kind of overdue, I feel, Marvel backlash. You know, I think just the general perception with like, you know, serious film critics, it's been really a long time coming, but like I think general audiences, there is that perception now that there is just too much Marvel, you know, and I feel like some folks are just a little frustrated with that whole, and now this is the important one, and it's like, no, now this is the important one. But all that being said, just watching this movie in a vacuum, and maybe it's because I went in there with such low expectations, but like I had a great time watching this. Like, I actually enjoyed this more on the first. Sorry, Nugma in the comments just asked, like, big question: how young does Paul Rudd look? Younger than me, and he's older than me. How's that? But like, I enjoyed this more on the first viewing than I had enjoyed either of the first two Ant-Man movies on the first viewing. Like, in fact, I genuinely disliked Ant-Man and the Wasp when I watched it. And the first Ant-Man, I was always pretty lukewarm on, but then I went back and rewatched it over the weekend, and I was like, what am I, crazy? This movie's great. But Quantumania, if I'm being really honest, I'm with Joe. It's a solid 3-star movie, you know? Frankly, Thor: Love and Thunder is probably a 3-star movie as well, but I enjoyed this more. I went with the weirdness of it. I really dug the visuals. Like, it just kind of felt like when you're a kid and you just like pick up a random comic, like from a series that like you don't know, and you're just like absorbing all of this information at once. That's kind of the vibe of Quantumania. And I wonder if general audiences are going to connect with that. But for me, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I just want colorful, weird shit in my superhero movies. And this gives you plenty of it.
That's exactly the metaphor that I was thinking too, Mike. It totally felt like being a little kid, going to the grocery store with your mom, and she lets you buy a comic book, and you just pull one out. You don't know anything about the characters, but the cover looked cool, and you're just thrown into all this colorful world. I'm shocked at how visually good this looked. And I don't know, I want to watch it again, because they actually, for our screening, Marvel doesn't always do this. They put us up at a really nice Dolby screen, so everything's really sharp. And I went into it thinking, you know, this is going to be purple goopy nonsense. And I thought it looked really great. I mean, and even some of the compositing didn't look, you know, it was clear where they're not matte lines anymore, but it looked like matte lines. But even that worked for me, because I was like, this feels like a fantasy or sci-fi movie out of the 80s. It's hitting all of those childlike things that allowed me to overlook some of the story problems that I thought were there, because I was just having so much fun with it. And like I say, I hope that I don't come back out of Phase 5 and say this was the best one. But it totally is a palate cleanser from movies like Love and Thunder, and even Wakanda Forever, which was so overburdened by Marvel universe building. As much as people are saying this is the kickoff of Phase 5, I didn't feel like that at all. I feel like you can watch this movie and with the exception of the end credits and the mid credits, you can walk in there and say this was a complete story. I'm happy, and not feel like this is the cornerstone of the entire world. So yeah.
I saw it in IMAX. Like our screening was in IMAX, which like never happens. Alec, was your screening like this as well?
No, it's just the same old theater I always go to. Although, did you guys get the God, we sound like such dicks, right? But did you get the little like Ant-Man thing with the magnifying glass?
Yeah. I still couldn't read it with the magnifying glass. I still don't know what it says.
At my screening, our tickets were giant, like they were giant tickets. So
that's what I needed.
Like we were small. Yeah, kind of cool.
Yeah, I would have preferred giant.
Yeah, we should have gone to the old person screening instead of the young person screening.
Again, I feel like lately I just keep rediscovering different parts of the MCU, and I keep like reevaluating and apologizing for previous views. But for like the last few years, I've always been like, I don't know, like this is how we're going to end up with Peyton Reed's Fantastic Four. You know what I mean? And you know what? Watching this movie, I wish Peyton Reed was making the Fantastic Four movie now. Like and Peyton Reed at one point was going, pre-MCU was planning on making the FF movie. And I know that Reed is a massive, massive Jack Kirby fan and like really, truly loves the comics and the source material. But like for me, Quantumania, like a good chunk of this movie, I'm like, this is kind of like the Fantastic Four movie I've been waiting for my whole life, where it's just like, obviously it's light to some degree and there's like great inter-character dynamics and stuff. But to me, the whole thing about the FF is like, they do cool stuff and they go to weird places. And that is 2 straight hours of this in Quantumania.
Do we have time for me to bring up reviews again? I need to get this out of my
Of course, yeah.
I need to get this out of my system before we actually talk about the film itself next week. Again, I hate to be this guy. I hate being the guy who like talks about the reviews of a film like it matters. Like you feel like I'm on like an online internet forum, like complaining for the mods to come in and help me or something. But I just think it's instructive, the response to this movie. It kind of reveals how we feel about films, particularly like, not like the literary timeless films, but just like pop entertainment is so context dependent. Because the original Ant-Man, if you look at its Rotten Tomatoes score, is at like a sterling 83% right now. And I think if you just view these two movies completely devoid of any context in a vacuum, Quantumania, I think, is quite better. But it just happens to come along at a time in which people are understandably sick of all this nonsense. I wish they had just waited one more film before they got sick of it. Just give old Kev one more try to win you back, because he won me back.
I will also say it's not a spoiler to say that Jonathan Majors kicks ass as Kang the Conqueror in this movie, but this is such a better intro for a big phase-long villain than Thanos ever got. Look, Infinity War and Endgame to me are just brilliant movies, like especially Endgame. And I think Thanos is like, just to me, I buy into all of that hype. But Thanos never got the kind of intro and build that we get for Kang in this movie. And if they are able to then deliver with Kang the way they delivered with Thanos, like, I don't know. I'm suddenly really, really hyped for the prospects of Phase 5 and Phase 6.
I love Jonathan Majors' performance in this. It is exactly what I want out of a big supervillain, where he's hammy and I love the one thing that I wanted them to nail about Kang is that in the comics, Kang likes to lounge. He likes to lay back and lounge on chairs. And there are 2 moments where he's just kicking back, and I was like, yes, this is what I want out of this, and he just the body language, he's got that presence, I'm always so afraid that that will get what Fox did with Doctor Doom, where they tried to ground him and, you know, make him more realistic. And he comes off just as like a petulant stock bro. And there's none of that here. That said, I'm shocked that this performance is working with so many people, because he's totally Shatnering in this performance. Like, he does this thing where he'll like move his face 3 times before whispering slowly a line with all this weight on it. And again, I'm like, more of this, but I'm shocked that that's the big takeaway that everybody's coming out from this, even the people who don't like it. It's like, well, this movie, I don't know what's going on, but Majors is great. And I'm like, how are you on his wavelength and not the rest of it? Because they're really of a piece.
I think he rules. He's awesome in this. Majors is amazing. And I think like Kevin Feige, it almost feels to me like he was like looking for a villain to grow old with. Like, he was just like looking for the one true villain, just like finding a young actor who can be like the MCU villain for almost eternity. I mean, like, I'm sure we probably won't see much of Kang after Phase 6 is wrapped, but it also just seems like a guy who could recur forever for just like the rest of the MCU. I think Kevin Feige found his man in Jonathan Majors. I think he's up for this nonsense, and it fits like a glove.
That's the thing with Kang. He's never gone for good. Yeah. Exactly.
Yes.
Thanks.
He comes back as something else always, and Majors can pull it off. Majors can pull it off. That's all I'll say right now.
Maznah says that one of the things she really loved about previous Ant-Man movies was Scott and Cassie's moments. Does this movie have that vibe with older Cassie now? It's different because she is a teenager now, and of course, like, you know, those relationships change. I will say that Catherine Newton is terrific as Cassie and probably has the best line in the movie. So yeah, like, this is and I think we're going to be seeing more of her in the future. Do they reveal which name MCU Cassie is going to go with? No, not as no, and that's not a spoiler. But no, like, we're not there yet. I don't think that's a spoiler.
This is where I'm going to diverge a little bit and say, I thought that there's no character development in this movie. And so none of that, and it didn't bother me. But it's not there. Like, it says that it wants to do, like, starts to set up this sort of Scott's missed all this time in Cassie's life, and Cassie's following in Scott's footsteps in a way that he doesn't like. I don't think it paid any of that off. I think it comes up when it's convenient, but that's definitely not the thrust of it. And I'm only saying that because, as much as we're gushing about this movie, and again, I really do like it, I think people that are going to go in expecting family drama on any of the familial characters' part, or really any sort of character development, I'm afraid you might get a little let down, because I don't think that's there at all. This is a bubbly bubblegum movie, nothing else. And so set your expectations accordingly.
Yeah, that's fair. And really, like, in terms of folks like hoping for, like, you know, big steps towards Young Avengers, like, this is that, but in kind of a, you know, like, it's not as explicit as what we got in Hawkeye, for example. You know what I mean? Like, Marvel is definitely going to take their time with that Young Avengers roster, to the point that I wouldn't be surprised if by the time they're ready to bring those people together, like, they might just be the Avengers at that point. So, like,
I just want to mea culpa or like repent from what I said last week or before, doubting Modoc. I loved every single second that Modoc was on screen. It's exactly what I wanted out of that character. It's so weird and disturbing and wonderful. So I was wrong. They nailed Modoc.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Modoc is supposed to be pretty much what we just saw.
Mm-hmm.
I can't speak to the comic version of the character. I thought, like, as a character, Modoc wasn't necessarily pitch perfect for me, but the design is flawless. You never get used to it. Like, it never stops looking weird. Like, it turns your stomach every single time.
Yeah.
It makes for such like a fascinating visual thing to have on screen at all times.
And the movie really leans into that, which I love. That's what you need to do with a character that's a giant head with tiny little arms.
Yeah, they're aware of it. They're never like, at no point is anybody just like, this is normal to us. Like, just
Yeah.
it's always freakish and unsettling.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because like two of Jack Kirby's most ridiculous creations during his Marvel years are Modoc and Anim Zola, right? And they took a more grounded approach for Anim Zola in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, which is good. I think that was the right move. And there is always the possibility that they can go full Anim Zola in the future if they want, right? But Modoc, they just leaned into it. Like they leaned as hard into the Modocness of it all as they possibly could here. And I got to appreciate that. So, but yeah, just remember, folks, head to denofgeek.com/Marvel or denofgeek.com/Quantumania. We are dropping all kinds of goodness there. Don Kay has interviews with director Peyton Reed and producer Stephen Broussard. And there's some fun insights about how the Fantastic Four really did influence this movie. And we've got some stuff coming on Kang. Later today, we will have explainers for the ending and the post-credit scenes, which are pretty wild and confusing, written by our very own Joe George. So after you see the movie and you're ready to dive a little deeper, head over to denofgeek.com/Marvel or denofgeek.com/Quantumania, and we've got you covered. But next up, like I said, Kirsten Howard taking a much-deserved vacation, but they are here in spirit with a brilliant interview with Jay Holtham of Marvel's Wastelanders fame. Andrew, is it time to roll that interview?
Thanks for talking with me today. Can you tell me a little bit about your background in the industry going into Wastelanders and how you came aboard this project?
Oh man, my journey through the industry has been a little all over the map. I started off out of grad school a billion years ago as a playwright. Lived in New York and wrote plays. I made the switch out here in about 2012 to move to LA and work in TV and film. And along the way, I wound up working with Marvel, working on Cloak and Dagger and Jessica Jones, those TV shows. And through that process, you know, I've met the Marvel execs, and one of them, Ellie Pyle, who's a good friend and a great supporter, approached me about jumping on board the Hawkeye podcast that came out, the first sort of round of Wastelanders. And that was how I got into it. It was the first podcast I'd ever written, and I had a blast.
I don't know whether scripted drama is the first thing people think about when it comes to podcasts. But it was such a dominant form on the radio in the 1930s, 1940s.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find yourself personally inspired by that kind of classic storytelling?
Definitely. And I leaned a lot on theater storytelling because, you know, so much of theater is in the dialogue and is in conversation. It's definitely a different format. And it's true, it isn't the first thing. It's not the first thing I think of when I think of podcasts, though there's obviously a very large community and sort of growing market of scripted podcasts and narrative podcasts. But yeah, for me, it was mostly leaning back on my theater chops and on getting people into rooms to talk. And then wrapping my brain around the radio show aspect of a narrative podcast or a scripted podcast, in that, like, there's a lot more you have to describe to the audience. You have to figure out how to make it okay for people to narrate what they're doing.
Paramedics out cold.
I'll go you one worse. Your patient's dead. Damn it.
That's all you gotta say? This is your fault.
Hey, pal. If I hadn't have stepped in, you'd be...
I know who you are. You're Wolverine.
I mean, Wastelanders is a huge 6-season podcast. It's been going since June 2021, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
Was that story all planned out from the beginning, or has it evolved as you've gone along there?
It's definitely evolved. When we started working, the writers were a bit siloed. We had a couple of sort of writers' summits to agree on some basics, and you know, Ellie as the executive producer and sort of head editor on the scripted side of it, did a lot of keeping everything sort of in line and balancing us out. I was given, when I built Hawkeye, Old Man Hawkeye, I was given a fair amount of latitude. And there's a fair amount that like the world allows, because it's divided into these sections, and each section can be very different from the other. So given the kingdom, I was able to build a lot of that world myself. And then once we moved into the Wastelanders and to sort of the team up part of it, then we were all pulled together, and it became a much more sort of traditional, at least for a writer, TV writer, group collective effort.
Did you feel there was an opportunity here to explore these characters and their relationships in a way that they haven't been before, given there's such a huge canvas here?
Yes. There was a great way to dig into surprising connections and weird connections, and also to really, really lean on the comic book history in a way that, to be honest, you know, as much as I love working in sort of comic book TV, that universe is so separate from the comic book universe. But this was allowed to be, just because of the nature of Old Man Logan, you are allowed to maintain that sort of shared history, those shared reference points of the sort of traditional classic Marvel characters and that Marvel world, that 616 world, while taking huge leaps. And for me, it was also a lot of trying to imagine, kind of locking on my sci-fi helmet and trying to imagine what that world would look like left to run rampant in its evolution over, 50 years, and how that would develop. But it was always going back to, okay, what's canon, and just being very conscious about where we were going to break canon and where we needed to break canon, and where we weren't.
Can you give me some examples of where you felt you needed to break canon with the characters?
Some of it was in connecting characters that weren't really connected before, in giving them a shared history or a shared background. In Hawkeye, a lot of it takes place at this circus. Yes. And, the Ringmaster and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants never really worked together. They didn't really have that shared history, but building that as like, well, they would. They could. And so building those connections and those sort of ideas was what we were allowed to do. And as we got them together, working with that, building on those shared histories and that shared idea of these people knew each other outside of it.
Right. Wastelanders has such a huge voice cast. What are the logistics of bringing in so many phenomenal actors to play these iconic roles, and how does that work? Because every episode you listen to, you hear the credits at the end, and it's just reeling off these absolute stars, and they've done such a great job. So what are the logistics of getting that many people on board?
In some ways we got lucky because we started during the lockdown, and so people were home and they didn't have anything else to do, and so I think we were able to get some people who might not have been available. But the other thing that we also have is the Marvel name. Everyone wants to be a part of the Marvel universe, to work on Marvel projects, to play these characters, and I think that attracts a lot of people across all of the spectrums. There's a lot of secret geeks out there. And thankfully, as the writer, I didn't have to manage those schedules and figure out how to get all of those people. And thankfully, for most of it, we didn't have to get them in the same room. And so there was a lot of juggling the schedule of, this person is in Ireland, so we have to figure out a time that works for them, and well as someone who's in California. But thankfully, they could be in their own private little closets doing it, as opposed to trying to get them into one studio. But it's a Herculean task, and blessings upon Ellie and her producing partner Jenny Madlet Rast, and the audio producers 1000 Birds. They were able to make it happen and pull it all together, and it's a beautiful group effort.
What have been your personal favorite voice performances in the series so far? And was there anyone that you thought, of course, they make a perfect version of that?
Names are completely escaping me. I can see his face. Chris Elliott as Rocket.
Yeah,
brilliant. I mean, obviously I am biased towards Stephen Lang as Hawkeye. He was just the perfect voice and the perfect person to inhabit that role.
Now focus all that hurt and anger and hate and pain into the point of the arrow. Focus it all the way down and shoot me.
Susan Sarandon as Widow is great. And I also, because I'm a former New York theater people, I had a bunch of like theater friends and old friends in it. Jim Conroy played Blob in Wastelanders, and we went to college together and actually haven't seen each other or been able to work together in a really long time. So that was a real thrill. And another great actor I know from LA, Ramiz Monsef, played Magneto and is just one of my favorite humans. So it was just like, it was really just a surfeit of riches, to use yet another fancy word.
So is there anyone specifically that in your mind, they are that character now, just having listened to so much of them playing them? Like, has there anyone been that iconic to you? I don't want to make you play favorites.
It's not playing favorites. It's honestly just named Michelle Hurd. Will always be my Bobby. Like that's just, she's so wonderful and gave such a great performance that it's locked in forever. I can barely imagine the character any other way.
As this Wastelanders is audio only, like you can't incorporate the visuals usually associated with comics, with TV or movies. So what have the challenges of making a Marvel podcast been?
Oh man, I mean, figuring out the action and figuring out the producers were really, really excellent with helping me remember that certain sounds might seem distinctive, like pulling an arrow back in a bow might feel like that's a distinctive sound. It is not. Shuffling cards is not a distinctive sound. So it became a lot of, okay, what is a distinctive sound? How can I also incorporate describing what's happening into the dialogue, and how in some ways, to limit that action and still let the audience's imagination go through. You don't have to narrate every single punch, but you do also have to be able to communicate the physicality of a scene to the actors, because they're still going to add their grunts and their oofs, so they have to know a little bit about what's happening. But mostly it's really just leaning back on as much as possible, getting characters into a room so they can talk, and letting the imagination fill in the scope, especially with the big action sequences, and also when we in Wastelanders, when we cross into Marvel world, it was a lot of, or Marvel City, it was a lot of communicating to the producers how that sounds differently than the regular world.
Were there other Wastelanders versions of characters that you would like to have included here but weren't able to fit in?
There were a few. There was, although we did use Magneto, I had written a scene that did not make the cut because it didn't actually work in the story, of Magneto talking to his cat, Charles. And I had this like desert person living in exile, and I liked that. We got to use so many characters and so much of the world that and characters that I never even sort of imagined we would get to use. So that was, I felt like at least for me, I know I got to use almost any character I wanted to in many ways, especially once we got into Marvel City, and I was able to write for like the Fantastic Four, which was just a thrill.
When you talk about Magneto sort of talking to his cat, it always reminds me of how great Magneto is when he's just left to his own devices.
Yes.
I'm thinking about like original Secret Wars Magneto sort of roaming around.
Yes.
Sort of touching things, putting things in his mouth, just no idea what he's up to. When he gets bored, he gets very creative. So
he does. And he's such an emo character. I feel like we kind of forget how sort of emotional and in good ways passionate and like also just impressive. He's, if he were in high school, he would have dyed black hair and it would hang in his face, and he'd be walking around saying, "You just don't understand me."
That's true. Is there another Marvel character or team that you'd like to write for or direct?
Oh, definitely not direct. I have no interest in ever directing anything ever at all. That is way too much work. I am far too lazy. Writing for, I mean, right now I'm writing a comic for Bishop, and that's really exciting. I would love to take, I love the X-Men. I love the New Mutants. I would love to take a crack at the New Mutants. Would be a lot of fun. I've written a little Peter Parker Spider-Man for Marvel Unlimited, and would certainly love to do more. And I miss the Champions. Like I like the New Mutants. I like a good teen group. There's just something about the like soapy teen drama and the optimism and hope in young characters that I really like writing for.
So I don't know how much we can talk about in terms of well, this is supposed to conclude very imminently, Wastelanders.
Yep.
I don't know how much of the sort of finale episodes we're allowed to discuss here, but I would love to know what you imagine the story being of these people, finally getting together at the end, and instead of sort of a final climax in a movie, which maybe everyone gets together and there's sort of 25 minutes of action. You've got 10 episodes of a team up here. So everything's happening as a slow burn almost.
Yes.
So how do you go about writing a slow burn team up?
I mean, the good thing is that we had so many threads to pull together. And I got to work really closely with Mark Waid, which is a dream come true, and Nick Bernadone, on sort of building this out and like figuring out how to. The trickiest thing here is, we had all of these series that had their own emotional arcs and their own stories, and then we had to find a way to knit them all together. And I think that helps with the slow burn, so that there's a point of the coming together, and then they're together, and then there's a big climax. And there is a lot of action, and it's very thrilling, and a lot of very surprising things happen. But what the format also allows is there's a lot of like long, deep talks, as well as these five broken people who have lived through an apocalypse and the aftermath and have done terrible things and had terrible things happen to them and have lost everything they cared about, have to reckon with that and reckon ultimately with how do you build a better world. And not to make it all sound very ironically nerdy and like frou-frou, but it really is a conversation about how do you rebuild the world. What are you trying to build the world that was before, or are you trying to build something new? And for me personally, that's always an interesting conversation and an interesting discussion, and to do it with these characters I think makes it extra exciting.
I think you're able to take advantage of that, especially as you've gone along. There's been more and more opportunity to have those moments where characters, as you say, are in a room and magic is happening. I'm thinking as well about the one episode of Wastelanders Doom, where they are getting Doom drunk.
And who hasn't always wanted to see that?
Right. And I just thought that was a very magical episode.
Yes.
Yes. Everyone's on top form, and just you're like, what is going to happen here?
Yes. I mean, that's the beauty of this, the beauty of having these actors and having these performers. Like, you really just let them go and let them do their thing, and just try to get out of their way and give them stuff to play with. It's great. It is magic, literal magic.
Yeah. So you said you're writing a Bishop comic for Marvel right now. What is next for you, or what is in the future for you at Marvel or beyond?
I mean, at Marvel, I've got the Bishop book coming out. The first issue drops February 8th. I've been writing a fair amount for Spider-Verse Unlimited on the Marvel Unlimited app, and a new arc featuring Ghost Spider-Gwen has just started dropping, so you'll get that. And then I've got a couple more Marvel Universe things that I can't talk too much about on their way, but keep an eye out for some really, really fun stuff. And outside of that, we just started the writer's room for the 6th season of The Handmaid's Tale, which I've been working on for the last year or so, and I'm really excited about that.
Okay. Is that the last season of The Handmaid's?
It will 6th and final season.
Yes. Is there
yeah.
anything that you can tell us about that? I don't actually
Literally
have
nothing.
Okay.
Literally nothing. I mean, partly because, all of the reasons, but also because today will be like day 2 of the writer's room. So there is nothing to talk about.
There's nothing to tell. Okay. This is just one for me, really. Who reads the credits at the end of every episode of Wasteland?
Oh, that is actually a good question that I don't think I know.
At the beginning, I feel like he said Tim Rose or Tim Rhodes.
Probably Tim Rhodes sounds familiar.
I tried looking Tim Rose and Tim Rhodes up, but I couldn't find someone with the credit. And this has weirdly been one of my favorite parts of Wastelanders because it would be easy to skip through those credits, right?
Yes.
But I find myself really involved in the dramatic reading and the way it seems to get more dramatic as the series goes on really tickles me. So I always listen to them all the way to the end. And I was fascinated by whether you knew who that was because I couldn't find the credit anywhere.
Marvel Entertainment and Sirius XM present Marvel's Wastelanders, starring Dylan Baker as Dr. Doom, Timothy Busfield as Star-Lord, Stephen Lang as Hawkeye, Robert Patrick as Wolverine, and Susan Sarandon as Black Widow.
I do not, but you know what? I can find out. I know the people who know.
Yes, please find out for me. Thank you.
Will do.
Yeah, thank you so much for talking with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
I gotta say, I have nearly finished all of Marvel's Wastelanders, and it's really, really cool. Like, I've kind of been dipping into these scripted podcasts a little bit, just have something to do when I'm, like cooking and doing dishes and stuff. And this one kind of kicks ass. Has anybody else listened to these, or is it just me?
I have not. I've never listened to any scripted podcasts. The idea didn't appeal to me until hearing this interview. That sounds fantastic. So I'm looking forward to checking it out now.
Yeah, I'm not a scripted
He's
podcast
really cool.
guy either. I think my last one was Welcome to Night Vale, which was fun. But yeah, I just kind of prefer the morning radio chat. But that does look cool. I mean, that cast is pretty wild. Did they say Stephen Lang is Hawkeye?
Yes. No, like there's like the cast of some of these is amazing. Like Susan Sarandon is Black Widow. Like the casting on these things is legit. First one is Star-Lord. Like, and they're all like this, like future things. The first one is Star-Lord. Second one is Hawkeye. I think the third one is Black Widow. And then the fourth one is Doom. The Doom one is just unreal. Like I'm surprised Kirsty didn't spend the whole interview talking about Doom. And then the last one is the Wastelanders, the big team up thing. But they're really cool. They're really interesting. So it's a neat space to get into. So next up, we have, not that I want to use myself as a good example of anything at all, but I did a wonderful, really fun interview with the cast and producers of Marvel's Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur animated series. This interview was recorded back at New York Comic Con in October, but I had already seen the first 2 or 3 episodes. The show is a delight. You all need to check it out. And if you don't want to take my word for it, then check out this interview, because these folks will certainly convince you.
You go, Moon Girl! Do your thing! Moon Girl magic!
For somebody like me, who's a big comics fan, right? And I go back to the original Jack Kirby comics, which are so different from the modern comics that bring in Moon Girl. So when they brought this concept to you folks, what were your first thoughts?
My first thought was, this is something that I needed growing up. I watch a lot of cartoons, and I haven't seen anything like this showing Marvel and Disney's first Black teenage girl superhero. It's historical, and it teaches like all the young, kids like me that like quantum physics is cool and one girl can make a difference. And I feel like that's a really important message that I needed growing up.
Everybody needed that quantum physics message growing up. The first thing I did was, because I was not familiar with the comic book, I called my best nerd friend who knows how to keep his mouth shut. And I was like, what do you think of this project? He was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, you have to be in this. And so that was my first thing when somebody of his ilk, I like to use the word ilk. And I will only speak in words that rhyme with milk. Somebody of his ilk telling me, like, dude, jump on this. do it immediately. And then once I saw the scripts and the first day of recording with her, it was like, this is freaking magic.
Yeah.
Like
Moon Girl
silk.
magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love to say silk.
Yeah, trying. No, yeah, same thing. I was amazed to be part of this culturally relevant, wonderful piece, and I knew Devil Dinosaur because I played Hulk, and so Hulk and Devil Dinosaur have a past together. I knew Devil pretty well, but it was interesting I didn't know about Lunella, and I didn't know that formation, and I just loved reading that script. And this is not only funny, but it's science, informative, about family. I loved it.
The family thing, that's it for totally hit me because I have a huge family, and we were all in that same household together. And if my grandmother wasn't there, then next weekend she's going to be there. So we were always around each other. So to show that black, especially where I'm from, it was that black family dynamic of everyone really being there together and pulling for each other, and which is in this 100%, like that really spoke to me as well.
Yeah.
They had the existing family and then the family that they end up making, in the making of the superhero. It's incredible. Yeah.
What I also love about this, it feels like a cartoon I would have watched growing up. Like, there's a very classic feel to the pacing, to the jokes, it has a great look, but it's centering characters that wouldn't have been centered when I was watching cartoons growing up. It's talking about things, again, like the smartest 13-year-old girl in the world.
Yes, indeed.
I love it. So it's just, but there's also this deep Marvel connection as well. So, does the Marvel element of it really kind of play into your performances at all? Or are you really just kind of approaching this straight up as just like this modern take on a classic cartoon feel?
I'm just now getting into the comics, but I'm a big fan of like Spider-Man and stuff. So, and I remember watching one of the Spider-Man, the Miles Morales Spider-Man that came out, and just it's very similar to that, into like how like when I'm in the booth, I'm very much like all over the place. Very like action packed, but along with that comes like the musical aspect. I feel like that's what makes it different from a lot of the Marvel things, because Lunella sings a lot and raps a lot, and each villain actually has a song that they sing. So that's what I feel like makes it a little bit different. We have these mixtape moments that while she's like kicking butt, like there's like a fire song playing in the background.
Yeah, it's one of the few projects I've been on where the music, the art, the acting, and the writing all drive together, as opposed to just one thing supporting the other. That's what makes it a very different show.
And everything is made by Raphael Sadiq.
Yes.
Oh my God, that music is so good.
Yeah.
So, I know you know this because you know almost everything. But for those who don't, like, we lay down the voices first. We do the voices. So after recording the voices, I was like, this is fun. This is amazing. But then later, when you get to see the animation that's been put to it, it makes you kick up your performance another notch the next time you go back in the studio, because you see all the possibilities now, all the possibilities in that universe. Fantastic, man.
So I've only seen the first episode, and the performances are already so kinetic, and it's already so fun. So I can't wait to see now, like, what the future episodes are like, knowing what you just said.
It informs you a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah, seeing it all done and seeing how visual it is. It's you have the art of the emotions going on. What would you call it?
It's kawaii.
Yeah,
You get to see a lot of the characters' emotions pop up in their eyeballs or like around in like little emojis, and it's very colorful, inspired by New York's like street art.
Yeah, Basquiat.
Yeah, Basquiat.
It's
wow.
Yeah, it's a different look. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Fred, you've done, these kinds of voices before, but Devil Dinosaur is so, I don't know how to describe it. He's almost like a big Labrador retriever.
Yes,
right?
He's a 10-ton dog. Yeah, he is. And he loves her. Lunella would do anything for her. And they're not just a pet, they're partners and they're friends. And where I am weak, she's strong, where she's strong, I'm weak, and she knows how to interpret my chirps and my right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I know, I love them too.
It's like,
that's just weird. In the best of all possible ways. Odd.
If you bring a 10-ton, T-Rex out of a portal, you have to learn his language,
I suppose.
And she does, he prefers being with her. That's home for him, And
I give you lots of hot dogs.
Hot dog training, really important. It was a big part of New York too, man. Yeah.
Gary, let me make sure I have this right in the episode as well. Pops is the one who's like
the handsome one.
Yes, Pops is the best looking, steals the show. No, Pops is like Pops is the one who's like, he's like, oh yeah, there's totally lizards in the in the sewers, right? Was that Pops' line in the first episode?
Yes, absolutely. And just a little bit of background on Pops. Pops is Lunella's granddad. Started this roller rink back in the 70s just to make for the community, because back then they would have like Soul Night where the black people could come and skate. So he's like, I'm making something that's all inclusive for the entire community. So yes, so he's got the background of the Lower East Side. That is his knowledge base. And even now, like, his place sits on what would be millions of dollars worth of property, but he's not getting rid of it because it's all about family and community to him. But yes, that was him in the first episode.
Yeah. Okay. I love that line. I was like, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Diamond, did you know, like, right off the bat, was that first musical number that opens the first episode, was that built into the first script, or did that come after you had already been cast?
I think once Raphael and everyone knew that I could sing, they were like, hey, we should have her sing the theme music. And I was like, of course. The song is incredible. Genius, inspiration, overflow. It's so good. I had a fun time recording it. Yeah, I think that was an afterthought, but I'm super happy they thought about me to do that.
Great. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So first thing I want to know is how long you've been developing this show, because it is such a very specific kind of concept and look and sound. So I want to know what went into this and how you were first approached with, the whole Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur idea.
Sure. It's been a while. I think we started talking about this in 2016, as early as that. But it really starts with Lawrence Fishburne. He's a huge comic book fan, and he went into his local comic store, and he was just drawn to Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. He was also a huge fan of the Kirby Devil Dinosaur comics, so naturally he just went right to that. And he fell in love with the comic. He brought it back to his producing partner, Helen Suglet at Cinema Gypsy, the company that made Blackish, Grownish, Mixedish,
all the issues.
And Oldish, right? And said that we need to make this. So calls were made, and here we are. But it took a while because we actually wanted to make sure that we got it right. We knew the weight and the importance of the show, but we also wanted to make sure that it had all the ingredients it needed: the music, the comedy, the drama.
Yeah, we can't wait for it to come out. Yeah, we've been boarding, animating 3 years through COVID. We're like, we want the world to see this.
Yeah, the production was pretty much done all through the COVID years.
Yeah.
As you see it. So I did a lot of recording, either separately or at the same time, but you had people that were living on the East Coast and the West Coast, but they were also recording simultaneously through Zoom and doing that. So we had that going with us.
It's amazing the incredible energy they've had, even through Zoom, even through the walls. It's like it really comes through, that kind of dynamic really comes through, performance. Yeah.
I mean, energy is the right word. Just having seen the first episode, it just crackles, from the first scene and that first song, and then just the way it sets the scene on the Lower East Side and the roller rink and even the stuff at school. It just goes and goes and goes and goes. And there's never a second where something fun isn't happening, where something isn't drawing your eye or attracting your ear. So, I mean, I'm not an animation guy. So how much of that was baked into this when, from the writing process on?
100%. Basically, it's about New York City. So New York City has a particular energy, a particular vibe. everything is moving quickly. I'm from New York, Rodney's from New York, so we wanted to capture that energy kind of on film. But also, I'm a huge fan of Edgar Wright, in particular Baby Driver and Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And its fast-cutting kinetic sensibility was something we wanted to emulate in animation because you don't normally see that on a kids' TV animated program.
Yeah. Well, I think where it pops the most in our shows is the mixtape sequences that we have that are basically music video sequences where everything comes together, the action, the music, the color, and we even flip to different color palettes. And so it's just nonstop, like total magic and poppy, gorgeous colors coming at you.
Yeah, so that's basically because we wanted to make New York shine and it's in the character in itself, and just, I know in a lot of cartoons that New York is just very generic looking, and we wanted to really show New York it's not slick, it's gritty, it's got atmosphere, it's got history, and we drew on the inspiration of street art, graffiti, Andy Warhol, screen printing, offsetting techniques, Basquiat. So we just wanted it to just look real cool. We had the graffiti, it was like done by a real graffiti artist. So it's just like we wanted to bring that authenticity to the look of the city as well as the characters.
It's not just the city. Like, the sense of place in this show is so strong because you're talking about a specific neighborhood. Like, you're on the Lower East Side, and not just the Lower East Side, you're on the corner of Orchard and Delancey at one point, you know? Like, so you're not messing around with that concept.
Yeah, it was super important to me to be authentic New York City because, like Rodney had mentioned, when you see New York represented, I saw an animated movie once where there was a hill and characters being chased on a hill. There's no hills in New York City. And I wanted something that was accurate, that you can actually go, I know that street corner, I know that restaurant, I know that park. To me, that was pretty crucial to the authenticity of New York.
Put as much scaffolding that's all over the city, we have that in our show too.
Totally.
It's constantly under repair, under renovation.
And also, like you said, the characters, we have so much diversity in our show. We did that purposefully and thoughtfully, and that's because our crew itself is also diverse and is a true reflection of what you see in the Lower East Side. So we actually recruited a team that was as passionate about portraying that authenticity on screen. So the majority of our crew, which is actually really, really rare, but are made up of women, persons of color, members of the LGBTQ plus community. So we're so proud that you have that level of authenticity
that
on
exist.
screen and off. Yes, that can actually all animate and be artists together on something as special as this.
Maybe this was intentional, maybe it is a happy accident. But because of that specificity, there is one really important tie to the original creator of Devil Dinosaur in Jack Kirby, who was born on Delancey Street.
Yes.
Like, who was basically born on like the corner of like Delancey and Essex. Right. So whether that was whether that was accidental or not, it doesn't matter. Like, for all the fun, new, important things that you're doing with this series, somewhere in there's still kind of like the beating heart of the guy who first made this happen. And I was like, oh my God, like, this is just such a fun coincidence. Or is it?
Oh, it is. It is not a coincidence. Jack Kirby simply was one of the most, if not the most influential comic artist of all time. To this day, we're still looking at his work to find inspiration, to find visual cues that we can kind of pull stylistically. You'll see we have in this show something we call the Kirby crackle, which we've kind of employed in certain effects for some of the villain characters and things like that. I mean, Jack Kirby is kind of the lead art inspiration of basically everything in comic books.
When you were designing this, like, again, I don't understand, animation process and production and everything else. But like, how would you describe the look of the show or what you were going for with these character designs? Because like, they're obviously amplified and cartoony, but they're also real. Like, every single one of them is a real person. Like, and it's not just, sometimes on animated series, it's like, you have your like 4 main characters and, they're very recognizable. And then like, the background characters or whoever are kind of who they are. I feel like every single person who shows up on screen
is like another lived in personality. And I want to know how something like that comes together.
Well, it has a lot to do with the talent of our amazing writing team. We wanted to make sure that, yeah, it did have that lived in kind of look, that these are characters that are not just on screen to kind of move the story along, to say what they need to say to get to the next scene. These are characters that basically have depth. It was important to me to feel cinematic. So each episode kind of feels like a 22-minute movie. And with that, you have to have the emotional peaks and valleys you would get seeing a Disney movie in the theater. You have to kind of feel all the emotions, for it to feel like Disney.
And in regards to just the design of the background characters, it's just important to really just not do something that's generic, like you're saying. I give props to our character designer, Jose Lopez, who and I worked with him, and just like taking pictures and going on the internet and looking up New York fashion and the way people dress, Timberlands, Air Force Ones, these are things that are very specific to New York. So we wanted to make that known and see that, so that it doesn't come off as just another cartoon.
Exactly. We made it our mission to make it everybody not stereotypical. Yeah. So as much as we could go outside the box and, like Steve was saying, give everyone depth and multi-dimension, not just in their characters or spoken word, but in their look, was really, really important to us.
It's like you look at that character and say, I know that character. That's my cousin, that's my uncle, that's my aunt,
And then there's the music.
Yes.
How did this happen with Raphael?
Okay, all right. That's a fun story. All right.
Yeah, he's got a great story.
I've been a huge fan of Raphael Saadiq's since the beginning. Tony, his writing, his producing work, his solo albums, everything. And so when I was developing the show, I realized this is the person. We have to bring on Raphael Saadiq. But, I was told, but he's a genius, very in demand, always working. I don't know if we could get him. So I said, all right, I got to figure out another way to kind of approach this. So his album Jimmy Lee had just come out, and he was doing a signing at a record store in LA. So I went down there, first in line, and in the 30 seconds he was signing my record, I convinced him to be on the show. I literally pitched him in those 30 seconds. So by the time my record was signed, he was signed onto the show. And the thing that I always take away from that is, people always say, don't meet your heroes. But the truth is, yes, maybe you should meet your heroes, because eventually they'll do music on your show. So, it worked out. But yes, he is absolute genius. He's doing all the songs, all the score. And it's amazing because all of the songs have a different style. We have songs that are pop, songs that are rap, songs that are Broadway style. He can do anything.
Literally anything, yeah.
And just about the music itself is what really makes the show stand out. It stands out from a lot of shows, and even for Disney shows, you're like, wow, this is Disney?
Yeah, because Saadiq does not only the songs, but the score.
Yeah.
So music produces the entire piece, and every single episode just keeps getting better and better and does not feel like a typical animated show. It's so sophisticated, so layered. It's incredible in so many different styles, like Steve said.
And we feel like that way from the music to even the script, the writing. Our writing team is amazing, and they're made up of all women.
Yeah, our entire writing team right now is all women, which is again really rare to find in animation, which has been really cool to work with.
How many episodes?
We have it was 17 episodes. Yep.
17 for
and it's a
season
full
1.
story. There's a full arc. So so keep watching, because there's some serialization and some build up.
Can't wait to see him in February.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Excited.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I absolutely love that Raphael Saadiq story. Like that is just like the best thing. Have either of you watched this show yet?
No, and I cannot wait to. I've been saving it yet. I've got a 5-year-old and an 11-year-old, so I just haven't had time to get both of them and me. I'm not letting them watch it without me. Sit down and watch it. So I can't wait. They're gonna love it. I'm going to love it. Devil Dinosaur and Moon Boy and Moon Girl are kind of a blank spot for me. So this will be sort of diving in for the first time with these characters. So I'm excited.
not had a chance to check it out yet either. I am a fan of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur through their work on Marvel Snap, though.
Yes. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur are having a moment thanks in part to this wonderful show, but also because of what a killer combo they are in Marvel Snap. So it's good. Well, folks, I think that is it for a very different episode of Marvel Standom. Don't forget to follow Den of Geek US on YouTube and twitch.tv/Den of Geek TV to catch our upcoming episodes. We'll be back next week with a full spoiler-filled breakdown of all the cool weirdness in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. Don't forget, if you came in late, you can watch this episode on our YouTube home, which is at Den of Geek US. It's also, you can find us over at denofgeek.com/Marvel. We are at Marvel Standom on Twitter and Instagram. Drop us a line. Let us know your burning questions and what you want us to cover in upcoming episodes. Something that we missed this week that you want us to dive into, that's the place to let us know. Don't forget, we also have a DC show, so check out DC Standom when you can on all major podcast platforms. Thanks to Andrew Halley, the best producer in any corner of the multiverse. Special shout out to Michael R. He makes the podcast version of this show all it can be. One more reminder, if you're one of those people who's only listening to the podcast version, come hang out with us when we're doing these live on Twitch and YouTube, folks. Most of all, though, thank you all for watching, listening, following, and subscribing. This has been Marvel Standom on the Den of Geek Network. Until next time, remember, folks, we stand together.